Good morning. Good afternoon, excuse me. Hi, everyone. So I see some very familiar names. Okay, hi, Robert. Hi, Diana, Anna Marie, Jolene. Hi there. Lovely to see everyone coming on and checking in. I've been very, very excited to do this tour. I just want to check that everyone is hearing me just fine. If you just hit those hearts or the likes and all that sort of thing. Hi, Casey. Nice to see you. I just want to make sure my sound is on full. It is amazing that I can stream anything from here. Hi, Marcia. And it's better than it used to be, but it's still not great. I'm still finding it's cutting in and out a bit. Hi, Martine. So I just want to have a thumbs up. Everyone's hearing me okay? Because this is a pretty significant part of the world. And there we go. I see a heart coming up now. Hi, Marty. Good to see everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Klondike. Welcome to Dawson City in the Yukon. Bonjour, Nat. I am thrilled to have everyone here. I'm thrilled to be here. I am here with a couple of good friends of mine. Hey, Chloe. Hi. And my friend Rod and another that doesn't want to be on screen, so that's fair enough. Hi, Marilyn. Nice to see you. Great. But we've been out all morning exploring down the valley. Now, I did do a very short Facebook Live this morning up on the top of the Midnight Dome, which I will show you up there. But it's nice to see everyone joining on. There seems to be a bit of a delay, but that's just fine. So listen, let me launch into it. It's quite all right, Dan. So let me launch into it, everyone. And I will have time for Q&A, but there's a lot to talk about up here. So where am I? Well, I am in Dawson City in the Yukon. So this is and I'll mispronounce, but the Klondike people have lived here for thousands of years. But Klondike is where Klondike comes from. And the Klondike River is a tributary, and it's just down about 2 kilometers from here, and it's a tributary of the Yukon River. So I'm up on the mighty Yukon River. Now, the Yukon River begins in those lakes in extreme northern British Columbia, like Lake Bennett and Tagish. So if you imagine where Skagway, Alaska is, when you come all the way up from Seattle or Vancouver, you get up to Prince Rupert, and then up past Juneau and in the Lynn Canal, and that's where you get to Skagway. It's the longest fjord in the world. Well, and how people traveled here for ages is they would then walk from there up the Chilkoot Trail until in 1900, the White Pass and Yukon Rail was finished, and that went up to Whitehorse. Then I'm another 600 kilometers by road and roughly 600 kilometers, maybe even 650, hey, Hallie, by river, and that comes up to here. Now, I am about 200 miles, maybe 200 kilometers, 150 miles, something like that, from the Arctic Circle. So I'm way up north. That means that we don't technically have the true midnight sun. Hi, Faith. Yeah, and I'm going to talk all about that, but pretty close to it. So since we've been here, we got in yesterday, 4:30 in the afternoon, went up on the dome. The sun has just been kind of moving around us, or as my very scientific friend will point out, the sun really isn't moving. We're spinning and moving around it, which is very important. Obviously, this place is synonymous with the gold rush and the history of North America. Obviously, this is incredibly significant to North American history in every way. I mean, meaningful in the sense that it is a tribute to desperation, human desperation. Now, if you track it back, I mean, we can argue that when the conquistadores came from Spain, when Columbus first settled, these people are so simple, we can enslave them all. And then soon they find silver down in Potosi and what is now Bolivia, this extraction of wealth. But in this side of Turtle Island of North America, this story of rush really begins back in 1848 and 1849 when you have the gold rush into California. Then they move up and they find gold on the Fraser River, 1858, and then up into the Caribou, up into Barkerville and the Kootenays, and that was those huge gold rushes that really financed the formation of British Columbia as both a colony and then as an integral part of Canada. Then they move north, and it's here in 1896. And let me just tell you about this, where they discover gold. Sorry, I got a little vibration on my phone, so if I need to adjust it, I will. I apologize, everyone. That's just I think it's not bad. Okay, let's switch this around. So this is a miner working his sluice box right there. Someone's left him a bottle of whiskey, which is pretty nice. But here you go. Tribute to the miner, dedicated to the Klondike gold miners, past, present, and future, recognition of their contributions to Dawson City and the Klondike region. In 1896, gold was discovered on Rabbit Creek, now known as Bonanza Creek, by Skookum Jim. Skookum is a Tagish word for strong, George Carmack, and Dawson Charlie, on the advice of Robert Henderson. This event sparks the great Klondike gold rush of 1898. Now, we have spent all morning down on Bonanza Creek, on Rabbit Creek, and they are still mining down there today. I will put up a lot more. I've actually made a longer video that I'll put on to YouTube. Hopefully the shakes have gone away now. Hopefully that vibration has gone away on the gimbal here. But I just want to take you up and give you a sense. By the way, these are lovely birch trees. I'm exactly 1,000 meters, about 3,000 feet above sea level. The high today is meant to be about 16 Celsius. It was -2 this morning when I got up. I get up earlier than everyone else, but then I always go to sleep earlier than everyone else. So that's the trade-off. And I went up on the dome. Oh, great, Martine, thank you. But here we come out to the mighty Yukon River, and I'm not joking when I say mighty. So here is the spectacular Yukon, one of the world's great rivers. Hi, David. And this whole river, well, in fact, I thought I'd start right here at this plaque because I can show you the whole story on a map. The Yukon is the third longest river in North America, 3,185 kilometers, 1,980 miles after the Mississippi and the Mackenzie. So this is our system here. So if we talk about Atlin Lake, Atlin is considered the Switzerland of BC. There's Skagway, Alaska, right? Flows up to Whitehorse. Now, Whitehorse was named Whitehorse because of the rapids that have since been removed because of a dam, but they look like the mane of a white horse. And that is where the Northwest Mounted Police made people get off their rafts and walk them around after a few miners drowned in 1897. In fact, that border was controlled by the RCMP. And in fact, at the graveyard today, I was visiting the old graves of the Northwest Mounted Police, and it was shocking how many young men lost their lives way up north here. So then from Whitehorse, you go up through Carmacks and Dawson City. So this is where I am right now. And then you go, Old 40 Mile is not there anymore. But that was a border post, really. Eagle, Alaska. You have to circle. There's Fort Yukon, which is the one bit of the Yukon that actually crosses the Arctic Circle, and it comes all the way out into the Delta. So not only in terms of transportation, if you were coming up here to Dawson, and this was the first gold rush in a real sense up here in the far north, you travel all the way up into Skagway, you would hike up. Yeah, that absolutely, Martine. We know how north we are now. You'd hike up over the Chilkoot Trail, Lake Bennett. All the trees in Lake Bennett are 126 years old because 126 years ago they were cut down to build rafts. We found an old raft yesterday. It was really cool. And then they would sail all the way up here. Of course, in the winter you had to do it on a dog sled, and that's why on the Yukon flag there is a dog. But for all of these gold camps that were Alaska, when they wanted to get out of Alaska, this route through the Bering Sea was virtually impossible. And after Fairbanks, down in the middle, you have the Alaska Range and Denali, the tallest mountain in North America. They couldn't get through there till a train was built. So they would take boats right back up here to Dawson, and then they take them all the way down to Whitehorse, and they would get on the train to Skagway and sail away. This is what the delta of the Yukon River looks like. And sometime in my life, I've been promising myself for over 20 years, I would like to float it. Right? So and you do it because it's not a particularly challenging river, but it is amazing. Now the Moosehide Slide, I just want to show you up in the distance here because there's a rock slide up there. This is the Midnight Dome up behind me. Now I'm going to show you around town. Sorry, it's like the phone is just vibrating in the, there we go, that's a bit better. That's the Midnight Dome. That's where I drove up yesterday afternoon and again this morning. That slide though goes way back. That one predates European settlement here. So it took place at least 1,700 years ago. And this is the Gwich'in language right up there. Pretty significant as well. But down on the Klondike. And now a gentleman named Ogilvy, and if you've been to Montreal, you know Ogilvy is a famous shop. But it isn't National Mining Week, Chloe. I didn't know that. That's amazing. But Ogilvy was up here with the Geologic Survey of Canada, and he said the big gold strike will happen on one of the tributaries of the Yukon River, or of the Klondike River, and that's where Bonanza Creek is. So I've done quite a few little videos that you'll have to let me upload. We have no reception down there, but we've been down looking at mining equipment. Spent 3.5 hours this morning. We'll probably drive down there a little bit later today. Now, there's a statue of a woolly mammoth up there. I'm not going to walk that way, though, although I'm tempted to walk. I want to squeeze in as much as we can today. But the woolly mammoth, of course, they were all up here. This is one of the few places in the world that can legally trade ivory because, of course, mammoths are extinct. And as they're extinct, if they find their tusks, then it is genuine ivory. But this city, so the gold rush begins in 1896. They come out with their gold after they've claimed. But Carmack's and Skookum Jim and Dawson, they keep mining for a number of years. They sold part of their Bonanza claim for $200,000 in 1898. Can you imagine? I have to calculate what that money is worth in this day and age, but that's how rich they got. But they figure of the 120,000 people that left to come here, in 1898, 30,000 people arrived here, making this the largest city west of Winnipeg in Western Canada, west of Winnipeg and north of Seattle. Seattle became sort of the gateway, and it just boomed. But even to this day, this is the only paved street because the climate is so harsh here. There's no point in paving the streets. And they built these gorgeous looking buildings, but with the false facades at the front of them. And people were so wealthy. Is Ogilvy a Banff clan? That's really interesting, Alison. I genuinely did not know that. Right in downtown Montreal, one of the big department stores is Ogilvy's. So you have these false facades on the front of the buildings, and you can see the corrugated iron. Remember, this place, let's just remember, we're just a couple of 100 miles from the Arctic Circle. We're also extremely inland, making this purely continental, which means when you get into the dead of winter, in December, for example, you're getting about an hour of daylight. You're brought to life, of course, with the Northern Lights, which have seen queer sights, but you could easily be dropping into the minus 40s. In fact, in the graveyard today, we found a grave of a woman who died in her home here in the center of town from freezing to death, and she was 60 years old. There's so many of those sort of stories as well, which really matter. Let me cross over. If this cuts out, and I don't think it will, I turned my phone right off and reset it and turned it back on, but I want to zigzag along. I want to try and show you some of this incredible architecture around here. But the wealth that came out of here is just mind-boggling. Of course, they started building the huge dredges right back sort of 1906. And right in front of me is one of the many, many, many buckets you see lying around of these giant dredges down through here. And look at this. Look at this house here. Don't laugh at me. I am over 125 years old. I'm rusty and crude looking, but during the time of the gold rush, the builders didn't have a world of choices for their materials. They used flattened oil barrels for sidings, and here I am, the wall. This wall is 125 years old. What do you think of them apples? So these guys have some gold panning in here. Might take my friends out, and we might just go. I didn't bring my pan from home, but I want to take them out, and we can go back. There's one claim that's by the Klondike Visitor Association that you're allowed to go pan at. Otherwise, you're absolutely not allowed to, because obviously people are still mining. It is fascinating. So they do say during those 2 or 3 heady years of 98, 99, 1900, the amount of wealth flowing around here, they said behind the bars, kids would be panning the garbage and still finding gold flakes. And you'd pay for everything with gold. The majority of the miners were American. The RCMP, the policers, the Northwest Mounted Police would have been Canadian, British. And so they flew both the Union Jack, the Union flag, and the, sorry, noisy dog, and the American flag. But Pierre Burton, famous Canadian writer, there's the book on the Klondike. Pierre Burton was actually born here. Jack London, of course, comes north, finds no gold, gets scurvy, and writes 120 stories about the experience. And then, of course, the bard, look at this lovely gold pen here. And then there was the bard of the Yukon, Robert Service. And he lived down in Whitehorse. He worked in a bank, but he wrote all the many stories. The art and the stories. And of course, during those heyday years, they had a newspaper here. So we have it all chronicled. And so as a historian, it's like a dream come true. And, the last time I was here, The last time I was here was 2006, quite a long time ago. I've been back to Alaska quite a few times, but I haven't gotten back up here. This is the old Imperial Bank of Commerce there, gradually fixing it up, but I tell you what, it's still looking pretty rough. I thought they might have it fixed up, but we'll go talk about the Kino in a minute here. I just want to curve around the downtown hotel. That's where we're staying. And indeed, I'll try and get a video this afternoon. I can tell you how much gold is here, Joanne, but we are going to go in and absolutely this afternoon, at least Rod and I are going to join the Sourtoe Club. I am actually already a member, but I don't know where my certificate is. And that means they have these toes that they found frozen off people back from the gold rush days. They've got 2 left, so we will get a shot of Yukon Jack whiskey with the human toe in it, and you drink it back, and the toe touches your lips. Now remember, a chichaco is a new person, a newcomer to the north, and a sourdough is an old timer. And they say you have soured of the Yukon, but you don't have the dough to leave. By the way, across the banks, now I'm going back with some of these memories, but across the banks, there's a cave over there, and there's a person that lives in that cave. Now, whether that person's still there, I'm not sure. Incidentally, I have 2 more things just to show you. One right here, Every Child Matters. Of course, this is particularly Indigenous here, which is very, very important. And they had all the residential schools up here. And we talked about that in Whitehorse the other day, if you join me, about the fact that the residential schools here, they're making a process of reconciliation, because can you imagine how the world was turned over? It is said, George Carmax was the one who registered the first claim, but it was probably Skookum Jim who actually found the gold, but they didn't register it because he was Indigenous. Now these gentlemen are fishing down here in the river, which is pretty darn nice. That guy's standing on a big chunk of ice and fishing. I have not plunged, by the way. There's a big current in the river, and I just don't want to chance that. Now in the distance is the Yukon ferry, and it wasn't working yesterday, but it starts mid-May. And if it's running, then before we start doing shots of Yukon Jack whiskey, we will go over to the other side and drive around here. This is where the top of the world highway is, and that's where you go up to the most northerly border crossing in North America, up with Alaska. It's paved on the Canadian side and not on the American side. When you cross the border, you get down into Chicken, Alaska. So, and you don't like the whiskey with the toe in it? Well, you know what? When you live this far north, look at this, a river highway. Now, this was all fish camp. Historically, the Indigenous peoples all through the north talk about fish camp and moose hunting. But up here, the route of the steam whalers, that's what I was talking about earlier. So obviously, we're over here in Dawson, but all of these are all gold camps through Alaska. So they would take paddle wheelers all the way in here, would have been checked in by Canadian customs, and then they would switch over and they would sail down to Whitehorse and then take the train to Skagway and then take a boat for a week. It's just incredible to think about that. And this is what one of the paddle wheelers looks like. I can't remember the number. I think there was up to 250 paddle wheelers that were out on the rivers throughout the north and throughout central British Columbia. And so forth, which is very significant, because they would travel, anywhere that it was faster than traveling by land, I tell you that. But you had to wait for the breakup to happen. But can you imagine, this is the Kino. There is a town in Yukon called Kino as well. But it's pretty incredible. Also, just because it happens to be out here in front of me, this is what we spent a good hour with this morning, was on one of the big dredges out here. Now imagine you have no formal training and you come and work on one of these dredges. Look at the production of gold way back in millions of dollars, way back in 1910, for example. But the story of these dredges is incredibly complicated because we're so far north. Oh, sorry, Robert, is your birthday tomorrow? Big hugs, my friend. Let me try and put something up tomorrow. These are all hoses that they stamp in the ground to melt the ground, because of course it's all frozen, and that could take, thank you Martine, that could take weeks, months, or even a couple of years to soften it right up before they start dredging it. These dredges would travel 0.8 of a kilometer or half a mile in a whole 8-month season, and they turn the ground over, and this is what it would look like after. If you think thumbs would be nice and toes. That's a good point. The excuse me, Robert, you're going to be 60 tomorrow. You don't look like you're 60. You look like you'd be turning about 40 tomorrow, but I do want to say, I'll say a really quick happy birthday to you, my friend. So, Jean de pays, c'est à ton tour de te laisser parler d'amour. Because we're driving all the way south, so I might try and throw up a Facebook Live in the morning. I'm actually doing a private virtual tour in the morning on Wowzitude at 8 a.m. my time when it was still below freezing. Anyway, coming back up here. So 2 great big ravens. You might have seen I did a little short. We saw a nice red northern fox yesterday. No bear. And today, the whole time we were out in the gold fields, and really out in the gold fields, the whole time there was moose poop all over. They say there are more moose in Yukon than the 45,000 human inhabitants. Now look at these paddle wheels. You're welcome, my friend. Now, at the front of these steamers would be people working with a long pole. And why do they have a long pole? Well, because the volume changes so incredibly much. I'm low down here, but if I were higher up, you'd see how much snow is still out there. And so the sand would be moving all over in the sandbars. So they have to be checking for them as they make their way through. And there goes the ferry. I already know what our afternoon plan is. We are going to take a ferry over the Yukon River there and just go up the other side and climb up to the highest point. Well, I don't want to say every time. I think every time I've driven that road up to the US border, I've actually seen a grizzly too. But there goes. So they run this here, and if you take the road, the Dempster, up to the high Arctic, you have to take the ferry as well. Well, that is fantastic, because I mean, we were a little restricted for time to come up here. Yeah, a ferry. Diane is now in love with ferries. But now look at this structure. Now, I did show, those of you who joined me the other morning, I showed you the one down in the Klondike, down in Whitehorse. But this whole place is just a living museum. They have architectural controls. But let me show you what a northern house would have looked like. Now, remember, right now, you're looking at about 21 hours of light and then dusk. There's no official night anymore. So this is actually advertising scenic flights. But there's the grass roof, which would help insulate you in the winter. They obviously had a fair bit of rain the other day. The streets are always muddy here. That doesn't bother me. And there's the Yukon flag right there. And so Yukon, of course, is a territory rather than a province, which means it doesn't have tax-raising ability. But aside from that, it's self-governing. And I believe they have 9 members. This was the capital until in the 1950s. The population here fell to about 700. So the flag is beautiful. But when I get back to some of the history here, the Klondike Highway, which we were driving up, I had it in my head 1973. It wasn't open until 1978, and it wasn't winterized till 1986. That's how isolated we are here. I just want to show you one little bit of history here, which is a tough one. And this is so true of the Norse. But the Princess Sophia, this is when a group were leaving for the winter after their mining season, and they would travel down. Anyway, the long story short is they would go all the way down to get to Skagway. They loaded the steamer up, and then going down towards Juneau, there was such a huge storm that the steamer caught a reef and everyone perished. And you can imagine a small community like this, just how devastating that would have been. It is said if you fly the length of the Yukon River, because the water's so clear and healthy for the most part, you will actually see so many paddle wheelers that it sunk over time. But these were the lives of the people in 1918. Yeah. Well, hi there from England. Lots of people from England here. And lots would have been here 125 years ago as well. So stick up to the waterfront here a little bit. I want to wander into town and show you some of the spectacular architecture, but also I'm a little worried I'll lose my connection when I do that. Now, the other place you got to go here, now it's not open till weekend, so we're not going, but is Diamond Tooth Gertie's. That's the oldest casino in all of Canada, and that is here. And of course, it rocks during the season when they have a grand old time. And you have, of course, your classic can-can dancing, everything you would associate back with gold rush days. So it's kind of significant. You are noticing as we wander along the edge here, you see all these orange stones. This is all the Every Child Matters, and this is going back to the fact that whilst Canada was becoming a rich country from this resource extraction in places like this, There was a culture, well, there's 14 First Nations here in Yukon, and their lives were turned on the head. Now, this is a lovely liberal society now here. That makes me very proud up here in Yukon, a long process towards reconciliation. And here on the right is a little model of what a cache would have looked like. So I'm just going to let some people by me just for a second. And then as I do come over here, now I wish I could speak Klondike. I cannot. But let us remember with love the children who are taken away to the residential schools and everyone affected, both past, present, by this harmful policy. The first Indian residential school in the Yukon was opened in 1903 and the last one closed in 1985. So I started doing tours up here in 1999. I spent 2 full seasons up here. And I didn't see night for those seasons. I was in Alaska and Yukon. That's how I got to not only know this place so well, but I was bitten, as we say, you get bitten by the north. And I genuinely love it. And it's a moving place. And you just have a different world view. By the way, when I walk around everywhere through here, everywhere, you see big chunks of quartz. Quartz associates with gold. Here is the Yukon River in all its glory. If we carried on up, it is, Justina, it is incredibly recent, and it's important to know that. I was still finishing my undergraduate degree when the last residential school closed. So this is the cultural center right here for the Gwich'in. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I appreciate the contributions, and I really do appreciate them because we're just up here, you know, I'm not working. And so I do some of these virtual tours, of course, because I hope people can share these videos and like and subscribe and all of that. But also gradually trying to make a little bit of money off of doing this. Look at those big chunks of ice still down by the river. So the spring breakup has happened. Yeah, I think, you know, when we talk about the residential schools and we talk about that history, it is so incredibly recent and it's meaningful. I'll just finish what I was talking about down here, though. There's a camp down in the distance there. But as you wander down or take the river down, you'll be going down river, even though it still goes north from here. That's where you get to 40 Mile. That was basically the border. And that is where George Carmack's would have registered his first claim. And they claimed 3 of them, either sides, and then immediately kept working them and selling them. So cool. I'm thrilled the ferry is running. I'm not kidding. I tell you what, I'll take the ferry over this afternoon, as long as they're letting people. They might just be grading it right now. But if they let us on with the car, no, there's a car on there. If they let us on with the car, I'll do a little video going over. And then you drive up and around the back. I won't drive all the way to the Alaska border, but it is just so fantastic. And the Yukon River is pretty powerful. Now, I just want to turn around and give you a sense of some of, this is in the style. It's stylized, of course, but that's more the teepee style. Although up here, they had these cool low wooden houses that were all designed around the salmon run. Remember, this salmon run all the way up. I mean, there's a fish ladder in Yellowknife, which is, say, 600 kilometers south of us. That's how far the salmon come up this river. And so it's actually a longer run even than the Fraser River down in British Columbia. And they come all the way up. And that was this wonderful food harvest for people as they prepared for winter. And I mean, winter, pretty severe thing. So you can see as well, I always feel like when I'm way up north like this, that I sort of feel the curvature of the earth sky. Whether I'm really seeing it or not, it does have this sort of, deep magical blue that you see here throughout, which is just spectacular. Now you see a ton of deciduous forest, which is also, I think, a little surprising, feeling like we're this far north. But you have birch trees everywhere. I'm just going to walk past everyone who's having a get together. I don't know if they're having a conversation or something. But there's the Klondike government right across from us there. And I believe they represent, these days, about half the population. If you go north in Yukon, there's one town called Old Crow way up in the far north. This is Dawson City in the Yukon, in the far north of Canada, far northwest. And so the Old Crow's the only place that doesn't actually have road access. But let me talk about, more modern, but still classic travel. Look at the metal boats with very flat bottoms on them. And that way you can pull them up and the water changes so much. Last night, saw 2 separate canoes going across because people live on the other side of the river as well. And so for about 3 weeks in spring and 3 weeks in fall, you can't go over because they wait for the freeze up or the thaw, and otherwise they go across. This is isolated living. I mean, in the true sense of the word. No fast food here, by the way. But yeah, Dawson City and the Yukon. And then, you know, you suddenly in 1899, they find gold out at Nome, Alaska. Do you know people got on this river and rode their bicycles 1,800 kilometers to get out to the Barren Sea to keep panning? Here's a smaller version of one of the many, many boats that would have worked these rivers for years. This one had, I don't know if it had a paddle wheel or maybe an outboard of some sort. It's probably a built-in one. But it is, yeah, it is remarkable. And then, of course, they had the boom days during the gold rush. But the fact they're still mining here. I mean, we were down at claim number 1, you know, discovery claim as they call it. And we follow up, and about a kilometer in the distance, you could see people still mining. So here's the sawmill. Thank you, Colleen. I appreciate that. And this is also where the story just gets so much deeper. Because even though the gold rush, you could say, as the story goes, the gold rush is over, so honey, bye-bye. Stake out your claim on some other guy. I wined you and dined you till the money was gone. The gold rush is over and the bums rush is on. That's only about 300 people out of the 30,000 who got up here really got rich. But they kept going, and you learned that you got rich from not mining, but from mining the miners. But up here today, just where he drove down Old Bonanza Creek, the amount of equipment, there was one mine area there, and our other buddy knows a lot about this kind of equipment. He figured there was $1 million sitting there. Hey, salut, Alain. There was about $1 million of equipment just sitting there, and it wasn't actually working. They seem to be mining higher up just at the moment, and I guess down like Discovery Claim, the ground was still frozen. And of course, you're dealing with permafrost, right? So this ferry service is provided free of charge by the government of Yukon. I tell you what, I saw a car going over. Oh no, it was a work vehicle. I see, the truck came off. But maybe we could go at like 10 o'clock tonight because it's not going to be dark. I tell you that much. There's a red canoe over on the other side. So for those of you who like to golf, there is a 9-hole golf course around back there. One of the big problems in the golf course is that the foxes come out and steal the golf balls. I have played there probably 6 or 7 times in my life for the sheer fun of it. And even if you drive straight, the ball bounces like it's hitting cement. I don't drive straight too often, but it bounces like it's hitting cement because the ground is frozen. So I'm just gonna come down across the street. So let's head into town a little bit. And if it does cut out, I'm very sorry. I don't want it to cut out. I want to have a good recording of this. I mean, we are in, you know, one of these most magical places and historic places, and it's hard to get here. It's not impossible though. Remember, if you live up here, you get Northern Allowance, but there's still road access. It's just a long drive. Fuel is $2 a liter, so that's what it was in Vancouver, but it's more expensive than Alberta. But it's isolated living. I see that Lucy just mentioned Fairbanks. Fairbanks is a place I really enjoy as well, although Fairbanks doesn't feel as historic. It's actually slightly further north, but it's not as high in elevation. See, we're at that 1,000 meters, 3,000 feet. Oh, there's a house for sale down here. But some of these people come back. Hi, Jane. Some of these people are here generationally, and you'll see all that deciduous forest dotted up on the hill. Part of the reason I got up, well, I wake up early anyway, but I went up looking for bears this morning. I didn't find one. Oh, thanks, Marcia. It is wonderful, isn't it? I mean, this is a magical place to come. Don't ever, if you ever have the opportunity to come here, don't say no. You can fly up now on Air North from Whitehorse. It's still an hour and 10 minutes flight. I mean, that's how far up it is. I always think you need 2 full days. There's a big raven flying around. You know, the drive will feel a little long tomorrow. What we're doing tomorrow is we're driving back down to Whitehorse. Probably leave a bit later and just get in later into the horse. And then the following day, we're driving down to Skagway, Alaska. So we're following the miners' route, just kind of in reverse. I'm going to do everything in my power to find a safe place to swim in the Lynn Canal, the longest fjord in the world. but I just want to come down. I mean, I could wander each one of these streets because they're so interesting. There is, Karen, that's a great question. So they have a medical clinic up here. And at the end of the day, this most of their budget here, I guess all of their budget, comes from the federal government of Canada because it's a territory, and there is a requirement to provide healthcare. And of course, dotted out around us are other Indigenous populations as well, very isolated. So yeah, you've got full-on medical facilities. Of course, if something was major, you'd be flown down to Whitehorse. And Whitehorse has a proper big northern hotel. Lucy's just mentioning, great questions. They're both good questions. So Lucy just asked, or said that you took the train from Skagway to Carcross. Yep, that's the White Pass and Yukon Rail. Yeah, that was finished in 1900, of course. And they say once it arrived in Whitehorse, the gold rush was over. But right up till 1982, that's how you'd get in. Now, 1942, they built the Alaska Highway, of course, to move troops, the ALCAN, the Alaska-Canada Highway, which is about 85% in Canada. But American military troops built that, the Army Corps of Engineers, an incredible bit of construction. I mean, incredible construction. But generally, people still came up into Skagway by ship. You know, you have the Alaska Marine Highway, and then they would take that up to Whitehorse and carry on. Now it's just run. In fact, I think Celebrity Cruises now owns it and just runs it. I really think it's an important thing to do, but it's a shame that the cruise industry really controls most of the tourism in the north. I mean, really does. And I think that is a shame. So two other questions. The snowfall, Hélène is asking about the snowfall as compared to Banff. Probably about equivalent. It's more that when winter comes, it just stays frozen. Of course, they have the Yukon Quest, the 1,000-mile dog sled race that leaves Whitehorse and goes all the way to Fairbanks one year and then reverse the next year. And it calls in and it just follows the river the whole way along. But you'd have clear days for a lot of the winter. Clear days, but of course, dark, right? That's the big trade-off. See the license plates? All have a gold prospector on them. It is not dangerous here. So that's a very fair question. In fact, it's extremely safe, I would say, if anything. Everyone is friendly. The miners have great big signs, keep out, because they're kind of cagey about what they're finding. And also there is a problem with claim jumping. But I would never worry about, locking a door or any of that. This car over here is really cool because their license plate is number 9. I bet they've passed that down in the family. I'd say the whole territory is 45,000 people. So, but you'll see this is an unsurfaced road. So the fires, Chloe's just asking. So there's some of these, I've seen damage from fires that I knew about back in the 90s. Yeah, there was one section that looked very recently burned. The big fires last year, though, Chloe, were actually up in the Northwest Territories. That's where they evacuated Yellowknife. So that's as a crow flies, it's not terribly far, but you have to go over a huge range of mountains. So that was the big thing. But there were fires up here. And in fact, they're already in the process now of evacuating Fort McMurray in northern Alberta. So a lot more fires. Yeah, Yukon is kind of a closed ecosystem because basically the population live along the Yukon River. The territory itself is about 475,000 square kilometers, which is 90,000 more than Germany. Like, just again, to give you a sense of just how big this is. Gentleman's working on his boat, listening to some classic music. It's lovely. But there is, it's unfortunate for them, but of course, Alberta has a government that denies anything to do with climate, so it just keeps getting bitten by its own inability to acknowledge science. Now, these buildings, in terms of the architecture, there's the visitor center, the cultural center for the Indigenous population. But all through some of these other buildings you see here, which are obviously tourist homes, or maybe rental for season, but they're up above ground. And so, they're up above ground because the ground is frozen underneath. So you prop your buildings up, right? Get all the way up to Inuvik, which we were pretty tempted to hang that right and keep driving. It does, Cindy, actually I'll answer that. But, we could be up at the Arctic Ocean in 880 kilometers, which is about 650 miles. 600 miles, up at Tuktoyaktuk. But you got to do it in all-wheel drive because the road is unsurfaced the whole way. But look at these massive buildings out here. So these incredible. So yeah, they'd be plowing the roads. But because the ground freezes so solid, in fact, it's one of the things I was learning today when we were driving along or looking at some of the early mining is you could build deep shafts in the ground for mining without having to reinforce them with wood because the ground was frozen. So, I mean, some factors helped them along, and they would use these giant steam engines to thaw the ground and then wait for spring when the water starts flowing to try and wash it and see if you're getting cold. I mean, this is how much work. But here you have, there's the hardware store, and there's the false facades on the front of the buildings. I mean, the fact that they worked out how to do this so much without any formal training is just incredible. Thank you, Natalie. It's so here is the Palace Grand Theater over here. So Arizona Charlie Meadows, showman and self-made heroic figure, built this lavish structure in 1899 to prospect gold directly from miners' pokes. So the term of poke is your little bag of gold. And so the miners would come into town. Of course, you had a very, very small female population. You can imagine how in demand some women were. Absolutely, Martine. Yes, Martine's just asking if some of the buildings are crooked. Absolutely. The ones that are built up, propped up more, have done better. But yes, they're always dealing with a freeze and thaw. In fact, I'm just going down a little boardwalk here, which is busy half sinking into the ground. And so for these bigger buildings, they're keeping some heat going around them to keep it kind of thawed. And these kind of things would all be propped up. So say up in Inuvik, you have everything, all the services, all the pipes and everything are above ground. Here's the old post office. Can you imagine bringing the post up by dog sled? Apparently when they were moving the gold down in the horse-drawn carriages, they didn't need to hide it. People were not, because the control from the Northwest Mounted Police was so good, they weren't afraid. And that's what we mentioned before, that they caught all the murderers, all the crooks and the murderers during the gold rush. And that is why the Mountie always gets his man. Now, of course, to Indigenous populations, the Canadian Mounties sound so much more like colonizing force, and that's important. But this is Robert's service right here. The spell of the Yukon. I wanted the gold and I sought it. I scrambled and mucked like a slave. Was it famine or scurvy? I fought it. I hurled my youth into a grave. I wanted the gold and I got it. Came out with a fortune last fall. Yet somehow life's not what I thought it. And somehow the gold isn't all. That is the spell of the Yukon, ladies and gentlemen. And I have been absolutely caught in that spell down here on 3rd Avenue. Church is around, of course. Madame Tremblay, that was her store over there. If you would like a good book about women up here, you could read the one called The Good Time Girls. Belinda Mulrooney made herself millions. Interesting story as well is you get down to Lake Bennett. That's where they built the rafts to sail all the way up here. The first brothel during the gold rush was owned by Donald Trump's grandfather, and that is the origin of the Trump family money. And apparently from time to time they still need to pay a cut to the women. That's, I guess, another interesting point. So, lovely big Victorian Bay windows. Yeah. It is. You're very welcome, Chloe. I think a lot of that poetry. Now, there's Pierre Burton's cabin is up back of town. I probably won't walk that in the time we have here. But in high season, now, it's 15 years or something since I've been here last time. But there was a gentleman who was originally Irish, and he would read the poems. And I actually didn't bring my book of Yukon poetry with me, but I normally do. And it's at Dawson Lodge. I come up and show you one of the old log cabins. And but you could spend a day or two just on the architecture because it's fantastic. So look at this now this is the kind of cabin, to Martine's earlier question, that's really losing its foundations. I wonder if it's still being used. And there across, I'm just gonna have to go across this parking lot. I'm sure I'm safe walking across through here. But there is Diamond Tooth Gertie's out there, the first casino in Canada. In fact, when you talk about Nellie McClung and all of those early suffragettes, the ones who really fought for women to get suffrage in this country, who I respect, but also Emily Carr, called for the expulsion of the Chinese. So deep stories about all these things. But they were the ones who moved about banning the gambling and everything here because they felt that it was causing dens of iniquity and so forth. Iniquity, and probably true. I'll just let you contemplate this as excuse me as I sneeze. I still have the tail end of a cold all the way from Spain. Oh, another cool thing. So, being up in Yukon again now, I met three lovely Chilean people the other day, one Argentine, and then the guy who served us dinner last night was from Spain. Excuse me, thank you for the blessing, Robert. Salud, amor. Now there's the Masonic Temple right out there, and there's a whole Masonic section to the graveyard. There's also a Jewish section, a separate Catholic section. I think they can bury them all together because they seem to all get on just fine. But Masons, it's not that surprising there's a big Masonic presence because you had to build everything by hand up here. So this is old Diamond Tooth Gertie's gambling hall. I have been in for the shows before. I've even played blackjack in there. Thank you. So I want to sneeze 3 times. Of course, the Latin American tradition is salud, health, amor, love, dinero, money. I don't seem to get to the third, which is always a challenge. But look at this fabulous restored building. This is the library and school here in the center. And they even have the branch of the Yukon University, which was a college. But this has happened a lot in Canada where these colleges have turned into universities. Of course, this country has the highest rate of tertiary education in the world, overwhelmingly and almost problematically because we don't have enough people going into the trades. So there's a local mom with her chariot. There's the old Triple J Hotel. I think over the years I've stayed in just about all the hotels around here. And the kids come up here to work in the summer. It's quite hard. The kids come up here and work for the summer, and they live in the campgrounds because there's not enough housing. And now that, of course, gold is over $2,000 an ounce, mining is just going strong. Once again, just a little reminder that every child matters, and that is true. Well, it should be true, I guess, more to the point. And when we say every child matters, there shouldn't be borders around that principle either, in my opinion, and hopefully in everyone's opinion. So yeah, food is pretty straightforward, although I had bison last night and it was really yummy. And we used to say it was super expensive, but actually it's not much more than Banff. Not that that's saying much, but I just show you this lovely building here. Yeah, the color is fantastic, isn't it? No, I mean, it's just such an interesting mix. This is a much more functional building from probably the 70s. So the Capitol was moved down to Whitehorse in the 50s. And again, the full-time year-round road didn't open until 1986. I love how isolated I am here. So here is the Robert Service School. So names that we've all heard of. Time. And the paint. The colors are just for the sheer love of it. Yeah, I think Dawson City should be on everyone's list of a place to visit. More functional homes in the back there. They're very, very typical of northern homes. Now, the physical environment around me, the valleys were much wider coming up here. A lot of that not muskeg, but more of the discontinuous permafrost with the thin, narrow trees. So we come in here, so you've got the big Yukon River Valley. So it's not really a glacial valley. The entire thing was glaciated, but the river valley. And then as we get down to Bonanza Creek, Old Rabbit Creek, look at all the fish along here. Look at that. Salmon at work. And they're narrower valleys that are real river cut. And the rivers obviously flowed deep enough, hiya Jeff, to get right down to the base rock. And that's where you see they find all that quartz, they get down to the hard base rock, and that's where the gold is sitting down, because of course 19 times heavier than water. And that's where they would pan for gold and find it. So they found gold all over the north, but it was here that you found a really nice big harvest. I'm sorry if I'm missing some people's names coming on, but I see Karen saying hi to Emma. Nice to have you here. It's nice to have everyone here because it's just such a unique part of the world. I wanted to get up here during the pandemic, and I will be putting up a short on YouTube, maybe even a longer one. I can't remember how long I made it, but Claim 33. That's where I used to always take people gold panning. And then they closed in 2022. It says for personal reasons, but of course the territory was closed for 2 years. They needed to close up north here because, you know, they have limited medical services. They have them, but they have them for a few thousand people, not for thousands. And so they couldn't have handled a massive outbreak of the pandemic. So it is understandable. So you got your petrol stations, gas stations here. Yeah, that's a nice front Gertie's Wing, but those are all the Westmark hotels. They were built by Holland America. Back in the 90s, Holland America really controlled all the tourism up into the interior here. And then they kind of lost control of that whole business, and that was a real shame. And so it's really cost Yukon a lot of money. So, hi. So it's really cost Yukon a lot of money. Look at the lovely school here. Now, for all the people of this area, they're here for just a great time now, because here we are moving into the next 3 months, midnight sun. And so they get to stay up. I mean, it's weird going to bed at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Of course, last night was a bit later than normal because I had to stay up for the hockey game. So we're all pretty much cheering for the Oilers, although I won't be upset if the Canucks get through, as long as the cup comes back to Canada. But it was pretty exciting. Another one of these old wood buildings here. They've had fires and storms and floods, everything you would imagine in an extreme part of the world here. But I've got a lot of interesting little videos to post. I do very genuinely, I really genuinely, more than I have in the past, I appreciate your support, whether you make a donation through my website or here. In terms of the tips, I do appreciate that, and I thank you for it. And I mean that because, you know, this little trip has cost me, well, the flight alone, and this is what's hard about the north, the flight alone was about $1,200 just from Vancouver to come up here and fly down and get home. You know, it's just the nature of it. Yeah, you know, the blackout curtains and the eye covers, Anna Marie, it doesn't bother me though. I really like the light. The cold, as many of you who know me, the cold doesn't bother me. Hey, there's Susan. I didn't see you here, my friend. So a big hello to my friend Susan. That's Sue, everyone, who I go and well, she's a friend of mine, but we teach together. We set up those programs down in Saginaw Valley State University. So it's so nice to see you here. And I believe, Susan, you're in Ontario, right at the moment. In fact, I think you're in London, so I hope you're having a good time. But here I am. By the way, you can come up here. You really should come up here with me sometime, everyone. And I'd have to almost charter a bus out of Alaska. Oh no, we could have gone and stayed in Hawaii for a week. Here's the old blacksmith shop. But you know, my friends have been asking about coming up here for years, and I thought, because I was out in Vancouver, it's only a 2-hour and 10-minute flight north, but it's still a long way. And so I thought, heck, this is the chance to do it. I've got a lot of travel coming up. So there's the Red Feather Saloon. These things, I don't know if they're open. And everything's a little more expensive up here. Well, they're kind of bound prices, but you know, that's just the nature of the beast, to be honest. You know, these isolated places, these are not, you don't, I mean, people do come up and pan for gold they mine now and they hope to get rich. But really you fall in love with the north and you just adjust your life a little bit. It's, look at the back on this building too. It's that corrugated iron. And then a house like this, Bombay Peggy's. These would have been guest homes. It would cost you, back in the gold rush days, it would cost you more for a night here than a month in New York City, as the story goes. Can you imagine? But also, modern Yukon. Do you see the pride flag in the window? Right? This is an extremely educated place. And all of the miners, I like to think, one of the things I really like about the mining culture is as long as you're hardworking and creative, they don't care what you do in your own private life, you know? Everyone's in it together. In the north, every individual contributes in their own way. So I think that's a really significant element. And I think that's why I think it matches kind of my value system, both as a Canadian and also someone who's interested in frontier kind of places. So just moving along the frontier. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Please feel very free to share this video and all those little shorts that I'm doing from up here. If you're happy to share them on your social media, I much appreciate it. Ask people to subscribe. Well, Merle, yeah, I think we all need to. I have a voice. I know it's not a huge voice, but it's bigger than some. So I want to use it for the right reasons. I haven't been on TikTok much lately, but I mean to have a go at my unbearable premier who's just extended their rule by 6 months, making excuses because of the forest fires that they deny. Here's the red mammoth beast throne. This is a fascinating place, and in an hour, it's not that I'm going to cover the whole thing, but I hope you see just how my love of this place is genuine. And oh, hi Michelle, sorry I'm sorry, I'm sure I missed a lot of people, but I really appreciate you hitting like. A couple of other just housekeeping things just to stay. I think I found a way to limit the commenting on my To Me Travel Facebook page, which of course has thousands of followers, which is good news, but it's extracting the spam from it. Here, I want to show you a few more of these buildings out here, but I do appreciate you interacting with that. And yeah, we're growing all of this. By the way, there's Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce and the Dawson City cannabis, because of course, legal in the whole country. I'm still not a user. Oh, another one. See, all over these buckets, like the dredge. And I'll show you. You'll show that when I get a chance to upload the video that I did from dredge number 4 today, I had to retake it 3 times because then I would read a new panel and I'd have to correct myself. And it's really important to me that I try and get all these facts correct, right? Because that's another thing we don't do enough of in this world is audit our information. Oh, nice to meet you, Toast. Anyway, why would you need to get stoned here? Well, I think, Chloe, probably when it's 23 hours of night. I think that probably plays a bigger role. So there is, it's so hot now, I'm going to be just in t-shirt. So there's the downtown hotel, very specifically. Now we're all sharing a room because it's expensive coming up here. So there we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, lovely to see you all. Oh, it's nice that you're driving back, Karen. Well, big hugs, lots of love, peace and love from the mighty Klondike. Look at that sky, and from the far north. Keep in touch, everyone. And it's nearly an hour, so it's my pleasure, and I'll talk to you all as soon as possible. Watch for Skagway, Alaska in a couple of days, for sure. I mean, for sure, I'll have to take you down there, okay? Skagway is kind of a cruise ship built version of this, but it means the windy place, so prepare ourselves. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.